John Lusk here of Lusk Archery Adventures. Series testing, successful hunting. I'm really excited to test a new broadhead here today. It just came out. It's by Rocky Mountain Specialty Gear. It's the Cutthroat 3-blade. They're well known for their 2-blade single bevel head, and I've done quite a few tests on it. You can check out here on my channel. It's always performed very well. And so now they have a 3-blade double bevel head. Pretty cool design. Let's zoom on in here, take a look at it, and then I'm going to put it to all the tests that I'm using at this point in 2021. Let's see how the Cutthroat 3-blade performs. Here's a good close-up look. This is a wicked looking broadhead. You notice that convex design to the blades, how they're curved. You don't see that in many 3-blades. That's supposedly going to aid in penetration and the way it cuts the tissue. I'm eager to see how that plays out. Of course, this is machined from a solid chunk of 41L40 tool steel, which is a great steel to use in a broadhead application due to its impact resistance. The blades are 0.035 inches thick, and the cutting diameter is 1 1/8 inches. This is the 125 grain model, so it's got a relatively short overall profile. And you notice the tip there is designed for extra reinforcement and durability to prevent curling and rollover. I want to explain a bit about my testing protocol for 2021 at this point. Okay, I do these tests to try to make them as relevant to hunting situations as possible, but I want to provide you with data points. You can determine whether those data points are important to you or not, but I'm going to give you some data points to gauge or judge a broadhead's effectiveness based on, okay? And that way you can make the best broadhead selection for you and your hunting setup and your hunting situation. So I do a flight test where I shoot 2 broadheads and a field point at 40 yards and just see relatively how well do they group together, and I score them accordingly. I do a penetration test, actually 2 penetration tests. One penetration test, I shoot them through a 1/2 inch layer of MDF surrounded by 2 1/3 inch layers of rubber foam mat and backed up by Clear Ballistics FBI grade gel. I do penetration test 2, a second test where I shoot it into layered cardboard and just see straight up how many layers of cardboard the broadhead penetrates through. I do a sharpness test where I'm using this really cool new scale that I have, the Edge on Up Sharpness Tester. And what it does is it uses this small little clip that's made out of aluminum with a wire, a copolymer wire that's engineered to be super consistent and also engineered to break in a certain way rather than to stretch, just to test edge sharpness. And so I put it on the scale that they make, and I measure the amount of grams of force it takes to cut through that copolymer wire. And there's a scale that comes with the tester that kind of shows you some different things like a butter knife and how many grams of pressure it takes to cut through this wire, a cutlery knife, a razor blade, things like that, so we can gauge it by. Then I came up with a scoring system based on broadheads and kind of how they compare to each other, a 1 to 10 scoring system to gauge that sharpness. Then I also do an edge retention test, where after penetration test 1, I also do a sharpness test, and I see how much of the sharpness has been lost. And I have a scale that I use to grade that on, so they get a score of 1 to 10 in that regard as well. Then I do a durability test, where I shoot fixed blade heads through 22 gauge steel plate up to 5 times. And mechanicals, I shoot through a 1/2 inch layer of MDF because they're not quite as durable typically. And I shoot them 5 times through that layer of MDF just to see how well they hold up through that. And then the final test that I do is I shoot them into a cinder block because I just want to see the zero penetration test, like test the overall structural integrity and durability of the head. And it's just kind of fun to do that anyway. And then I also have a score that I use for ease of resharpening, and I put the price on the score list as well. And then I take all of those scores, and based on how I think the broadhead performed, I give it a Lusk Grade, a score of 1 to 10 golden arrows based on how effective that broadhead is at accomplishing what it sets out to accomplish. And for all these tests, I'm using my Bowtech SR6 27-inch draw. It's at 72 pounds. I lower it to 65 pounds for the penetration test through cardboard, just because I don't want to shoot it all the way through and go into my wall. Okay, then for arrows, I'm using, for most of the tests, the Bishop Archery FOC King arrow. It's super straight, flies extremely well. It's also durable. But then for the harder impact tests, I'm using the Bishop Archery FAD Eliminator, the Firearms Dispatch Eliminator. It's footed, and so it's extra durable. And then for some destruction tests that I'm going to do down the road, I use the Bishop Archery Goat, the greatest of all time. This is the straightest, stiffest, most durable arrow that's ever been made, apparently. I mean, this thing is a formidable weapon. And so I'm going to be using this in some of my tests down the road. So that explains a bit of the testing that I do. I hope it's helpful. $500. Seven 3/4 inches. $575. It penetrated through 62 layers. Here's the Cutthroat after going through the steel plate 5 times. It's in perfect condition. I mean, you can't even tell it's been shot other than my fingerprints on the plates. Man, this thing really, really held up well. Here it is after impacting the concrete. And this was the same head that also went through the steel plate 5 times. It's in excellent shape. You can see the discoloration from the concrete and chips of concrete kind of embedded in it. But the edges, even where it went into the concrete, are still in good condition. The tip is still very sharp. No doubt this can be resharpened and reused many times over. So what'd you think of the Cutthroat 3-blade? Man, it performed very well. Go through the score sheet and see how it measured in each of the areas that I've tested it in and compare it to other heads and see how it performed with them. There's a lot of really good things about it. I especially love the durability of that chisel tip, love the steel that they're using there in the 41L40. I'm not really sure why they went with this curved convex design, although it looks really cool, and maybe there are reasons that don't bear out in my testing. I know it makes it a little bit more challenging to sharpen because you can't just lay it flat like you could with a normal 3-blade 60-degree head like that, where you can just sharpen 2 edges at a time. I mean, you can do that, but you gotta curve it a little bit while you're doing that. That makes it a little bit more complex. And then that tip is kind of a little bit of a different angle there at the end too. So not really challenging, but it's a little bit more complex to sharpen. I tell you what would make the head even better, honestly, to get it sharper, is to use the Stay Sharp 344. And I'm going to attach a link here at the end of the video to where I saw Stay Sharp did that exact thing with this broadhead. They demonstrated how to use that sharpener, and it changes the blade from 60 degrees right there at the bevel to 44 degrees. And it didn't take away any of the weight of the broadhead. You'd think it would, but it really doesn't. And yet it makes it quite a bit sharper while still retaining its great durability. So overall, I think this is a great head. Check it out, the Cutthroat 3-blade.